Find myself dancing along to the theme music every time.
Same here.
Good morning, good day, and good evening, folks. Welcome to another episode of Problem Busters. And of course, I am your host, Ollie, and we're playing the music again. It's amazing. And who is pressing the play button? No other than the esteemed Jonathan. G'day, mate.
Yes. Good day. And,
Thank you for making me laugh today.
I know my face when the music went off again. I was like, I should no longer be in control of our soundboard, but I'll still do
folks,
it.
you know, when you talk to a help desk or you ask anybody for some help with something, and then they admit that they've had a problem with this, that is exactly how Jonathan is feeling right now.
Yeah, exactly. In fact, I am the problem with this.
So, what are we going to do? We're going to go through some happy good news, right?
Yes, we are.
And I'd just like to share one thing off the bat. My parents, bless them, love you, Mum and Dad, have just upgraded their Nissan Leaf to a 2020 model. They must have had the previous electric car for, 7 or 8 years. And I love that. I love the fact that they are a little bit older than me. And yet, even in that stage of their lives, they're like, looks like we're moving towards electric cars. Let's get one. And the day that I sat in their old one, I was like, this is the future. This is just better tech than burning fuel in a combustion engine. So well done, Mum and Dad. And I'm really glad to see the whole world starting to move towards hybrids and electrics.
Yes. I think a round of applause. Oh, I don't have that on the soundboard, but yeah.
Awesome.
Oh, cool. Hopefully, I think the UK is moving that way as well. I think, is it diesel engines that are going to be outlawed soon?
Yeah. And in 8 years, you won't be able to buy a new petrol or diesel. Yep.
Yeah, you won't be able to buy a new internal combustion engine. Oh,
how long have we been burning fuel in a box and calling it an engine? A long time, right?
Very long time.
I find that embarrassing as a technology person that we didn't move forward.
Yeah, I think so. Do you know what it is? I think it's the trend. I'll probably get into it. This is a nice segue to one of our first stories. But actually, that's not even actually one of our on the list this week. But
You're giving people bonus stories.
I know, I'm giving them bonus stories. I think there's a trend of renewable energy becoming more of a focal point rather than finite energy sources becoming more valuable as time goes on, like coal. And the trend is this new world of new technology and open access for places like universities and different type of research labs to create these new forms of or sources of energy to compete with what was before is just amazing. So, as Jean-Luc Picard would always say in the old Star Trek, is new frontiers and all that jazz. It wasn't that poetic, but it wasn't as poetic. Exactly. Patrick Stewart, I tip my hat to you for that.
And speaking of Star Trek, you know that Captain Kirk went to space, right? What a legend.
Oh, yes, yeah.
William Shatner. Not only a whole lot of albums, but now he went to space. And apparently he said it was amazing.
Yeah. I think Star Trek has always been not only at the forefront of creativeness in terms of visions for tech in the future, like, the flip phones and microwaves and all these other things, teleportation, were all kind of ideas that were made mainstream by Star Trek. But they also had the first interracial kiss, I think it was, between a black person and a white person on TV. That was William Shatner and, forget the lady's name. She played, is it Uhuru?
That's amazing.
Yeah, so that's a good one. And then I watched Star Trek Discovery even to this day, and they have a non-binary person as well, I think, on there. So
that's cool.
Crazy. Really good.
I
Star
like
Trek.
That. Thank you, Star Trek. Keep
Thank
pushing the
you.
boundaries.
Exactly, exactly. So, what do we have on our list of happy good news?
Well, I think we should start with the one that you're most excited about, the
Mm,
woolly story.
yes, the old woolly mammoth. So, a lot of our dreams, a lot of our hopes as a child to see a woolly mammoth may be realized as a firm who specialize in genetic research have raised around $50 million to bring back the woolly mammoth from extinction.
I love what the company's called as well. Colossal.
Yes, yes, because you always have to part of the whole package is the name of the company and what they're going to be doing.
You're not going to call it
Um,
pipsqueak, are you?
yeah, no, they're not going to. They're not going to call it minute.
Pea-sized.
and,
And it's quite
um,
cool, isn't it? Because it's not just about let's make dinosaurs, which I have to admit I think is pretty cool in itself. But it's also because we can see things are changing for elephants, for their habitat. And so there's this idea, isn't there, of creating a cold resistant elephant. Um,
yes, and it's kind of I wouldn't want to say eco-friendly, but it's the thought process that goes into reintroducing a type of animal that we haven't seen before. I mean, you're not going to really reintroduce a T-Rex that, if you put it back into the wild, will probably become the apex predator.
I mean, put it on
And
an island with a fence around it and people will come.
yes, they will. They will.
Could be a book and a movie in that, I
Yeah,
reckon.
what have we learned from that? Hey, is a certain park. um, so
I
I
would
think
be on the pre-sale list, you know it.
yeah, I would be visiting. I would have binoculars and I'll be on a boat. um, in terms of reintroducing it and putting it back into the wild, having a cold resistant elephant, so I guess there's a number of benefits ecologically as well as um, scientifically in terms of the research and everything. I think it's a positive. My take on this is I think it would be a positive outcome. Um,
And it does raise, of course, questions around genetic ownership and cloning and needing to think these things through and discuss them as a society rather than just rush in. But
yeah,
the idea of reintroducing large animals to restore ecosystems is really smart, isn't it? And like
yeah,
Yellowstone did when they introduced the apex predator of the wolf, and they found that the rivers changed course because the wolves were everything they did cascaded down through the ecosystem, and rabbits and ducks and otters and badgers and all these sorts of things were moving around based on the trickle down effect of the wolves
yeah,
being there.
yeah,
Amazing stuff.
yeah. It is, and not only that, the offshoot in sort of technological research in terms of carrying to term, I guess, a mammoth with significant changes in its DNA coming from an elephant, which is not the same thing but quite similar.
Mm.
So a lot of research in pregnancy and birth for different organisms it's I think it's a positive because you may find things that will benefit human pregnancy and birth and research as well. So
Absolutely.
plus, yeah, and as you said, it does trigger the whole discussion around the morals around it as well, because just because you can doesn't necessarily mean you should, right? We're not
Ask
going to bring
anybody that spent a long
pterodactyls.
time building something that never got sold.
Yeah, yeah, that's true. That's true.
Perhaps a
Have I told you
pterodactyl.
about my?
Cool. And what else
Cool.
we got? So let's jump on. So this is quite cool. So positive news had that the Premier League last month had the first carbon zero or net zero football match, which was between Tottenham Hotspurs and Chelsea. So Gary Lineker would have been pleased, and that's quite a big deal, right? To think that an entire game with all those lights, with all that energy that's used, could be net zero. It just goes to show that if we can light up a football stadium, fill it with people, and put it on TV, and we can do that carbon neutral, then surely we can do other things, right?
Yeah, and the capacity of these stadiums, I don't think people realize how big they are. I mean, the only thing that's probably big is probably like cricket grounds in India. But in terms of like American football and maybe smaller cricket grounds in the UK, the volume of people, some of these stadiums could seat, you know, comfortably, 60 to 80,000 anyway. So just that volume, which means you can replicate this Olympic Games, Commonwealth Games, all these other huge events, and
Government
have it,
buildings.
yeah, government buildings,
Yeah.
protests, everything,
Rock
you imagine
concerts.
exactly. So it's what I like about this is that it's scalable and you can
Yeah.
replicate it as well. So
Yeah. Agreed. All right.
yeah.
What else we got?
What else do we have? Look at me looking down the list of things that we have. I have lost my order. However, food markets in Vancouver. So, a
Is
charity
that
called,
Vancouver, Canada, Jonathan?
yes, Vancouver, Canada. I'd like to say it's my second home, but I've never been there. But everywhere in Canada, I want to be my second home. It's a lovely place.
It is a beautiful country.
It is. It is. Um, the Food Stash Foundation, they have a rescued food market. Um, and what they do there is they get food that would otherwise be destroyed, or because it's in fact it's surplus. So I was listening to one of my favorite guys to listen to, Neil deGrasse Tyson. He seems to know everything about everything, and he said that in the West we've essentially pretty much perfected the production of food. Not perfected is a loose term, but the volume of food that we have is so much that we actually have a problem. We hire people to help us not consume more calories.
Mm. Yeah.
And that creates a problem where we have a lot of surplus food now,
Mm.
where if a bag of multi like a bag of crisps with a number of packets in it. If
I
it's
love that you
usually
started with a packet of crisps. That's
yeah
so British.
proper British, you know what I mean? So when you open up, if one of those packages is damaged and you've got a pack of 12 crisps, um, historically supermarkets would just throw that away and call it damaged goods, and then put it in a special bin to put in a special tip. And people who would really want it and say, you shouldn't throw that away. That's wasted. Why can't I have it? And then we're like, no. So they put a padlock on that bin.
Mm.
There's charities like none of that round here, Sonny Jim. What we're going to do is we're going to create a shop, or we're going to push that food to people who need it.
I love that. And
Yeah.
58% of all food produced in Canada becomes waste, apparently. So that is a lot, more than
Wow.
half.
Yeah. So Neil deGrasse, you were not joking around when you said we perfected the production of food. Because could you 58%? If anything else, if there was 58% wastage,
We'd be
I don't think
outraged.
that. Yeah, they'll be outraged. I don't think that's not very successful. You know,
Yeah.
if I said, oh, here's a glass, but 58% of the water leaks out of it, you, you're going to look at me like, I don't know how this glass is going to help me. So yeah, I really love what the Food Stash Foundation's doing. And not only that, they've had so much that when they've stocked one of their stores, they've actually had to their warehouse is getting full, so they're kind of pushing it out to different places that actually require food. So that's fantastic. So, and again, scalable. We can move that over here in the UK. You can move it into Europe, the States. It's just really, you can replicate it wherever.
Yeah, I love that. Love that. Right. And also here's another nice one. So Positive News has that one of London's busiest streets, which is the Strand, has gone car free. So they've basically cut out the red buses and the black cabs, and this area was really quite choked up, and they've cleaned it out. And I just never would have thought that kind of part of London, one of the busiest megacities on earth, that they could convert that to being car free. Like, I just, as someone who grew up in a country that's very green in New Zealand, but also very car based, I just couldn't imagine, like, how would people get around? But isn't that cool? It's a
Mm.
sign of cities starting to realize that they don't have to be full of cars.
Yeah, yeah. Um, we're seeing that a lot. I know I just keep talking about the UK and in London, but we have that ultra low emission zone. It expanded last week, I
Why
would
don't you
like to
explain what
say.
that is for folks that aren't in England? Because this is quite a novel and important idea, especially for people that have asthma.
Yeah, so it was an experiment that started 10 years ago, roughly. I want to say, or around 10 years ago, maybe a bit
Yeah,
more.
yeah, about that.
Um, and it's a zone where if your engine produces a certain type of emission or an amount of emission pollution, then you would pay a tax on that to enter a certain part of the city, which is typically the center. So a study was done across London to measure the air pollutants around, like the particulates and whatnot, and the type of pollution. And it was found that in the center of London, it was pretty bad.
Mm.
And we have seen links of poor air quality to things such as asthma and a number of respiratory diseases. So the mayor, I want to say the mayor, I guess it's a form of government, introduced the ultra low emission zone, which means if your engine is over a certain size or produces a certain type of pollutant,
It's
you are
quite
not.
expensive, right?
Yes, it is quite expensive. Right now, I think it's around £12.50 to actually drive in that zone. So it's similar to the congestion charge, where you would pay a fee to actually go into the center of London, but that is indiscriminate of engine size, unless you're like a moped or like an electric car. Um, and you would pay that fee to be in that area because your
Mm.
car is creating emissions and adding to this whole pollution bit. The ultra low emission zone is okay, you can still drive around in there, but if your car is low emission, you can actually be like, oh yeah, you're free to pass. But if it's over a certain amount, then you will pay.
And then the first
Um,
thing that happened was the taxis, right?
yes.
They just all went to hybrids.
Yeah, they all went to hybrids for the ultra low emission zone. The congestion charge, if you have a taxi permit, you don't really pay congestion charge at all, but you do pay a yearly fee to drive
Mm.
around in that zone and in that zone actually, yeah, for in that zone. But the ultra low emission zone is just fantastic because um, it's pushing that whole view that we're going to be car free at some point, and you might as well have either electric scooters or bicycles to travel around. I mean,
And
the
and that
difference
means
in
that the
journey
city is
time,
just so much better, right?
yeah, and the difference in journey time is not that if I'm going to work and I take a bike, it'll probably take me the same amount of time than walking to the station and taking train, then getting out the station and taking bus and then walking to the office. Right, I'd just be a bit sweaty and a bit fitter if I take the bike. Um, but every day it's not stopping you every day to if you have a family to go in your car and drive your
Mm.
family around. It's just these small journeys that you don't need a car for, or you shouldn't really need a car for.
And it's just
Um,
cleaned up so many of the little trucks that used to drive around with delivering of things, and
yes,
I think, and it's just nicer to walk around. It's quieter because electric cars and hybrids are quieter, and noise pollution is one of the worst kinds of pollution in cities, right?
yeah,
And I actually noticed that in New York, and that was a couple of years ago now, maybe 3 years ago. Um, and all the taxis were basically electrics and hybrids. And I was like, where's this big, loud New York that I was expecting to see? And of course, that still happens, but it's not as noisy and as congested as it was. So
yeah,
I'd love to see more of that. Good on you, London.
yes, yes, yes.
Shall we move to India?
Yes, we shall move to India and how they are tackling air pollution through tiling. Dum dum
That is not
dum.
what you would expect at the end of that sentence, right?
No. No. So this plays into a similar situation we had that we spoke about in our last Happy Good News in Iceland, where they're pulling carbon out of the atmosphere. Um, so this is I don't want to say offshoot, but um,
It's a
there
form
was
of air purification, right?
yeah, there's a form of air purification. Um, and I think his name is Angad Dariani.
Apologies,
Um,
Angad. We wish we
yes,
could say your name
yes,
correctly.
yes.
One day we will learn.
Sincerest apologies. Had a filtering device, right? And it would filter um, the air to improve the air quality in cities like Delhi.
And when I think
Um,
of carbon in the air, I basically think of soot, right?
yes, same here, same here. Yeah, the older what always pops to mind is in um, Mary Poppins, where the chimney sweeps. I think it was Dick Van Dyke and the chimney sweeps were just all
We
just
just
properly,
learned so
properly.
much about your childhood.
Yes, yeah, Jim Chimney, Jim Chimney, I love it. Uh, so by
So
filtering the
Mr.
air,
Dariani's company is Pran, isn't it?
yeah, Pran, and they've raised 1.5 million in startup in investment, um, and they're trying to push the most advanced and cheapest artificial intelligence air purifier. Right, so it's just really pulling that carbon out of the air. An offshoot, or not really an offshoot. So what they were finding is when they're pulling the particulates out of the air, the filters were full up of what you would think of waste, but what you think is waste, an engineer would say is a raw material. Aha,
Indeed.
exactly. And when you get a raw material, you can provide that to another engineer or um, in this case, would be, I think it's carbon
Carbon
craft
craft
design.
design,
Yes,
indeed.
carbon craft design. And they would turn that into tiles. So they would combine it with rock waste from quarrying. So that's another piece of waste that they get in as well. And
And
they
this is
would,
amazing, right?
yeah, and they would combine it and form it into fashionable tiles, and they look really good.
Yeah. And
They
but
look,
it doesn't stop there. There's more, right? A free set of steak knives that that those tiles that have already
mm,
been created from carbon captured out of the atmosphere or pollution are themselves cleaning as much as 5 kilos of CO2 per
oh
tile.
yes, yes,
That's
yes, yes.
amazing.
It is. It is.
Clever people. So we'd love to see more of that. Well done,
Yeah.
Pran.
And I hope your tiles are available in the UK.
Indeed. Indeed. So something completely different. So Positive News has there's a words matter campaign of empowering phrases that have been created in a campaign to correct and improve the language of maternity care. And you
Ooh,
know all about this, Mr. Jonathan, because you've got a couple
yes,
of little ones.
yes, I
We
do.
just seem to use like 1920s language when we talk about women and pregnancy and children, and it's just there's so much we could do in this area
Yeah,
to normalize and empower something that is quite central to the species continuation.
yes, because yeah, I think the first time I heard one of the terms I heard, I shouldn't be chuckling, but it's a chuckle like really really was the geriatric pregnancy. The
And what does that
geriatric
mean,
pregnancy.
Jonathan? Because that
That
sounds like someone who's 75, right? When I hear it.
yeah, but it's not. It's if you're in your 30s, right? Then they will class it as a geriatric pregnancy, which
How
in
is that
my mind,
helping anybody?
in my mind, I know. I was like, oh, honestly, I was like, NHS. It was like, I'm speechless now. So it was a surprise. I was like, oh wow. So
Yeah,
yeah, and if you
progress can
apply
be
it
made.
exactly, you apply it to anything in your 30s, and you add the word geriatric on it, then it becomes a bit funny.
So go and
Yeah.
download the
It's-
the parenting app Peanut, and
mhm.
you'll find that they've got 63 outdated and hurtful phrases, which they have rebooted and are renaming Revolution Glossary. Good on you, Peanut, and thank
Yes,
you for doing away with geriatric pregnancy. It didn't help anybody.
I think so. I think that's the best because Apple did this a while back, and they got rid of things like master and slave in coding.
That's cool.
Yeah, which is really cool. But I think this is long overdue
Yeah.
with pregnancy.
And
Um,
I think in Melbourne when I was living there, so 8 years ago, the average age of getting married was 36. So what are we going to call those geriatric weddings?
Yeah, that's what I'll say. When you add it onto everything, it's like, yeah, geriatric weddings. Like, oh, okay. Your hairline's receding. You got a geriatric hairline. It's like, what? Oh,
And
man.
moving right along. What else we got?
Yes.
This is the
What
one you've been
else?
waiting for.
Oh, is this the ply scrapers in Sweden?
It is.
Oh, So, oh, I
So what?
can't even pronounce
So
this name. So,
just have a crack.
oh, Skeffelter? Skefter? Skefter, I think it is in Swedish. So this is a town or a city, or well, there's an airport um, in the north of Sweden. They have created
Not
like,
skyscrapers.
well, ply scrapers. Dad joke. I think my dad joke is level 100 right now.
Amazing.
So yeah, so it's like a mini eco. I want to say eco town, but it's
Mm.
it's structures built entirely of plywood using steel to sort of reinforce it structurally. They've treated the wood as well, which is really good. So it's fire retardant and it smells really good. So in terms of being fire retardant, they actually covered, which is interesting to me. Internally, they've given it like a buffer of flammable wood, where it will protect the structural integrity of the building if it does get set on fire, and it gives the fire services about 120 minutes to put the fire out.
Wow. And as we've
Yeah,
seen with Grenfell Tower and buildings that are built largely from concrete, steel, and glass, they could still go up, right? So I
they can
don't. I,
definitely. It really does. It depends on the facades that you use, or the facades, depending on where you are in the world. On the outside of the building, what's really good about this is that not only have they treated the outside of the building, they've also um, built it like there's a lot of glass as well. So
it looks awesome
it looks super awesome.
and
And
very Swedish. Let's be honest. Someone had to
yes,
say it.
yeah, very, 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 very Swedish.
And
Um,
I love the fact, like, they're quoted as saying, "Why build in anything else when you're surrounded by 480,000 hectares of forest?"
exactly,
Why
and
indeed?
it all runs on renewable energy as well.
They have biogas in their buses. They've got
Hmm.
Europe's largest battery factory.
Which powers
Uh,
that building, the sprinkler system at least. It's
yeah,
battery powered.
and they're looking at batteries for long distance aeroplanes that will become electric. I mean, our
Hmm.
world is really changing,
Yeah,
and I know the
and
climate change is really scary, but there is a lot of great innovation.
yeah, and I think a lot of the innovation in construction is really based around, I guess, material science as well
Hmm.
as prefabricated things. Like prefab is just lovely.
And the idea of
Because
prefab, obviously, is that you fabricate it before you knock it up, right? So it's
yes,
prefabricated. So,
yeah,
so what's cool about that is that people can choose to build things in a controlled, dry environment, and then take them to site and put them up, can't they?
yes, and it's really quiet as well, and you don't use as much tools. To lack of a better word, you don't use as much diesel engines. You don't need to keep a mixer running. You don't need to do a number of these
You
different
don't
things.
create
Keeps
as
the
much
yeah,
dust.
dust and noise and drilling. It's kind of, you get there, everybody knows their job, everybody knows where they're putting it. Zip, 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 zip. Also, when you do a lot of prefab for things such as, I guess, concrete, you can actually pre-tension stuff, so it can support a lot more. You don't have to wait for it to sort of cure and you don't have to pour it wet. You can actually do it all in a factory somewhere, and it's ready to support a load. Um, so
That's
that's the
awesome.
yeah, and a huge benefit to this is what they're learning from it is when you do have a lot of prefab, such as this sort of plywood haven, I would say, you can replicate it in different countries, regardless of where you are. There's no real dependency. Even if you're shipping in the plywood, the way the logistics worked is that ultimately it's still cleaner than building something from concrete.
That's amazing, right?
Yeah,
And a big
it's
part of that's temperature too, isn't it?
yes,
And
yes.
the purification of the concrete materials.
Hmm.
So good work, Sweden. Good to see.
Yes,
The building does look a lot like a big sauna, but I kind of like that. It's cool.
I want it to look like a big sauna because I'm tired of tall grey buildings.
100%. Wood is warm, right? I like
Yes,
that.
it is, and
I
it
even
smells
find brick is
nice.
quite warm, and it does smell
Yeah,
nice.
and it smells so nice. Well, not bricks, but
Well, I think they probably smell all
oh,
right. But right, moving right along. So let's talk about magnetic birth control.
oh,
So,
yes.
so folks
I think
have come up with a way to inject magnetic particles that could be used perhaps one day for birth control. Tell us about that.
we're here. We're here, Ollie. We are now in the realm of nanotechnology. We have. I know that's a bit of a big intro, but yes.
I loved it. I
So
was just thinking that it's taken us a year to get to that statement, and I feel like I've let the team down.
so what they've they being the scientists in the okay, I'm not gonna mess this up. This was Fei Sun and Wei Ding from the Institute of Reproductive Medicine at the Nantong University in China. Their research team have been studying artificial ways to sort of heat the testes in a way, um, well, as a form of contraception.
Yeah.
So what
And
they've
and the
deemed
problem
as
with contraception at the moment is
Mhm.
that we put so much of it on women, and it's not fair, right? So
Yes,
I'm quite excited about the idea of guys having something else they could do to do their part, right?
yeah, and it's also yeah, because I think it's a lot safer for guys to do it as well, rather than having the ladies do it. It's you know you're not really going under the well, you are going under the knife, I guess, depending how, but it's a lot easier to be reversed from what I understand. From what I
Yes.
understand,
Yes, and it sounds like
and
they
you
can be timed as well.
yeah
And interestingly, as with a lot of technology, this may raise the debate of, well, why wouldn't you have it, Mr.
yeah
Man? Well, I don't want to have it. My partner can be on the pill. Well, is that fair? Maybe we
yeah
should talk about that.
mm-hmm
Maybe you
mm-hmm
could take turns, or
yeah
which one has the lowest risk? To your point, messing around with someone's menstrual cycle, that's
is not
powerful
great.
stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
I really respect people who just yeah, it's a big deal,
Likewise, yeah,
and if
it
we can
is.
save people some drama, then we should.
Definitely, definitely. And I think these nanoscopic particles, as the research team have called it, they'll just be injected into the bloodstream, and they'll be guided to where they need to be via magnetic field. And that magnetic field will generate heat and create the contraception.
That's amazing.
So yeah, I think that's amazing because
I partly
I,
want to inject it into myself just because it's cool tech.
yeah, I think yeah, because I think being able to inject something into somebody and still monitor them and obviously not have really any adverse effects anywhere else in the body because I mean you don't want your kidneys being well actually that would be quite cool because they are made of gold, these nanoscopic particles, so you'd actually have gold kidney stones. um but
Wow.
yeah, but being able to monitor it and obviously the main use is actually to go to the testes. I do have to put the disclaimer there that there's no relation to the kidneys or any of this research to do with that. That was a joke.
But it,
But yeah.
but it does show a direction and a trend and an interesting area of
Hmm.
technology. Like maybe one day we could work out the magnetic signature of a cancer tumor, and we could employ a similar technology to target it or
Yeah,
something.
and
That'd be
heat
cool.
it up and stuff like that. Yeah, I think we're here. We've finally reached nanotech. I've been
You
watching
may not
sci-fi
have a
for
hoverboard,
years.
boys and girls, but you do
No,
have nanotechnology.
exactly. May not have a teleporter,
There's only
but we
one thing
do.
that can follow this, and that is penguins. So
Oh,
fossils have been
yes.
found in my home country of New Zealand by children's, and it turns out that the fossil they found was a 27 million-year-old giant penguin. 27 million-year-old giant penguin. It would have stood 1.4 meters tall, but underwater it could have stretched out to 1.6 meters. God, I
Oh,
love penguins. They're awesome, and I just yeah. How cool is that? A 27 million-year-old penguin. Did I say that already?
yeah. Oh, you don't forget the giant penguin.
Giant penguin.
I
That's
love
so
penguins,
cool.
but I can't. To be honest, until this story came out, I didn't know that giant penguins existed. But to be fair, in the olden days, back in the olden days, everything was bigger. You know what I mean? But yeah, no, giant penguins. That is. I wonder how they alerted everybody.
Imagine, I mean, you think about the penguin being giant. I guess the shark was also giant, right?
Oh yes,
And
that's true. Actually,
that's
oof. But
that's
oh,
super cool.
it just raises a lot of things. I love because if you think back, the way penguins behave now, if that penguin, jumping in and out of water, could you imagine a 1.4 meter penguin just leaping
Mm,
out of the water?
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Awesome.
So Mike Safey, who's the president of the Hamilton Junior Naturalist Club, which is a city in between Auckland and Wellington in the North Island of New Zealand, keep those kids going out and looking for interesting things because what an amazing discovery. And it looks really cool as a fossil as well. Just
Mm,
imagine being there and finding that.
yeah. Oh,
And now
I
you
wonder
know a
if
bit
they.
more about
Yeah.
my childhood as a geologist's son.
Ooh.
Fossils are cool. So let's go on to Berlin.
Yes, Berlin, Berlin, Berlin. Where should I say there has been a car ban campaign. Um, the slogan I hear, it's about how we want to live. Oh, how we want to live, breathe, and play.
I
Which,
feel like we made that harder than it needed to be.
yes, yeah, yeah. I was there like, let me do this a bit more theatrically. I was like, oh, well, I missed out the breathe and play. Um, Lovely. I think this is a move. It's a positive move, like we spoke about in London, where the people themselves are actually complaining about the air quality,
Hmm.
and the government is listening, and they're all pushing towards doing something about it.
But it's happening a
Um,
bit slow for people, isn't it? Because, you know, apparently they say they'd need about half of cars to go electric next year in Berlin in order to meet
mhm,
the federal government's own targets for
yeah,
transportation emissions. And that's clearly not going to happen because they've only got 1.3% of vehicles in Germany being electric.
yeah,
So they need to reduce the amount of driving. And to your point, London's found one way of doing it. And this is another, isn't it? Which is cool.
yes,
Good for them.
yeah. It is. It is. Yeah, very good for them. Very good for them. I think when you have things like this that need to be driven top down, you there needs to be an incentive. If you miss your target, then everybody, all the politicians, maybe get a little bit of a pay cut. How about that?
Mm-hmm.
See how quickly the roads are empty and the air's clean.
Oh, well,
As a
and to that point, that's super interesting, right? Because if you look at a lot of our cities and a lot of our towns, especially in Europe and also in North America, the older places that were around before cars, right?
hmm
The the streets weren't necessarily so wide. The
no,
traffic wasn't moving as fast, right?
hmm
And it was just a lot quieter, and there was a lot more space around people. And watching Downton Abbey recently, and just enjoying that sort of living theatre history kind of vibe. I was just like, I'd love to walk through that little village in Yorkshire that it's set in, because it was safe, it was quiet, it was easy. And there's a nice little visualization in this particular Guardian article that basically shows what a particular roundabout and major intersection could look like without cars. And there's just like heaps of trees, lots of space for people to walk, heaps of the road space has been turned into area that you could sit and eat. And that's a big part of both of our lives. It's just better, right? It feels
yeah,
like reclaiming the streets.
yeah, and no cars does not necessarily mean no forms of transport.
Touche.
That's a key one as well because there are. um, there is a percentage of the population that may need assistance with mobility, and that is provided, or can be provided in these sort of new layouts and options, right? I mean, electric minibuses and stuff like that, and shuttle services and whatnot.
And that's another
Um,
example of an idea that we could get from, what do we call it? What's the right way to say it now? The developing world, perhaps,
yes.
places where people have less money. And
Hmm.
so they don't have these expensive buses and expensive trains. And instead, they've got little minibuses, as you say.
Hmm. Yeah.
And places like South America, for example, say Colombia or Bolivia or Peru, you turn up to an intersection and there'll be a couple of Toyota vans or whatever, and they'll hold 12 people each, and people will get into that van until it's full and then pay their 50 cents, and then off they go. And there's no timetable. They leave when they're full, and it works really well. So maybe we could take a leaf out of their book, no
Yeah.
pun intended, with the Nissan Leaf.
Oh, it's full circle.
I
Lovely.
think I'm doing quite well on the dad jokes too.
Yeah.
And there's only one place that we could ever end, right, on this episode,
Yes.
and that's back in Bonny Island. So tell us about that.
Yep. So there has been a positive shift towards creative artists. Well, creative people, artists and art workers will be getting, will be part of a basic income scheme, which is due to be piloted in 2022. So this tackles the age-old problem of, I wouldn't say art versus kind of science, but I
Paying the
think
bills.
art, yeah, paying the bills. Because I think art is overlooked a lot by, I wouldn't say society because we're all consumers, right? But people who make decisions, art is sometimes overlooked when it comes to spending. And cutting back on budgets if your government has a budget, because like, oh, what do you mean you're just going to be painting the side of a building? You have to take that funding and put it into, I don't know, a gate for a youth center or something
Or perhaps a
ridiculous.
statue of somebody who perhaps
Exactly.
doesn't need
Yeah.
a statue.
Exactly. Um, so this tackles that age old problem of creatives trying to, fighting for money, or you know what I mean, or for a living, um,
So that
and
they can make
really,
something that everybody gets to enjoy, right? Whether it's
exactly, and
art or
drives,
music or
yeah, and drives culture, right? A huge part of culture. Like if you look back and you look at historical things that we all look at, right? And you think about how things were back in, let's say, Greece or ancient Rome and whatnot. Really, the only things still about is art.
yeah,
Mostly,
art and ideas and
yeah,
some tech, right?
yeah. Like the creative thing is just a vessel. It's a vessel of communication from the past to the present, right?
Mm.
In my opinion. Wouldn't say, um, and I think it needs to be respected, and this is a positive move. And I hope that every government in the world does this, because creatives for a long time they're not really worried about. I don't want to speak for all creatives, but the impression is that when you're quite creative and you love your work and you love creating new things, um, you're not
That
really
you'll
going to
do it
focus
anyway.
on the monetary. Yeah, you're not going to focus on the monetary. If for me, I'm not a really creative person, but I do draw a lot. So if I'm drawing, I sit down and I draw in my living room. I'm not drawing like, oh, when I finish this drawing of a house, or I know it's not that creative. When I finish this drawing of a house or a flower or whatnot, I'm gonna sell it for millions on the interwebs. It doesn't work that way.
And it
And
kind of feels like the arts have been taken advantage of, right?
exactly,
And I think I agree. It's time to look at how small an amount of money it could be for people to be able to do something that has benefit to us all, and they'll probably still get a job, right? And
yeah,
accept that they can at least now spend a day or 2 days a week doing their theatre,
yeah,
or doing their music, or it's just and if you've ever lived somewhere that has had a reduction in the number of live music venues over time, perhaps due to development of apartments or something like that. It feels like the city is dying. Compared
Hmm.
to the other side, we come out of lockdown and people are going back into venues and you hear music playing and as you walk past. And that to me feels like the city's come to life.
Yes. Yeah.
So well done, Ireland, leading the way.
Hmm.
And well done to the Arts Council. And we'd like to see more of that, wouldn't we?
Yes, we would. Yes, we would.
And that's a wrap, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for
Indeed.
tuning in. Don't forget to subscribe. And we've got heaps of really interesting episodes coming up. So many that we can't
Yes, we
actually
do.
book them all in. So we have to stage them over time. Have a good evening,
Awesome.
good morning, or a good day wherever you are. And thanks for tuning in.
Ciao.